Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Adriana Serna. I am the Communications Director for the Caribbean Hotel and Tourism Association. And on behalf of CHTA, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Rebuilding and Refurbishing for Resiliency and Efficiency. Before we get started, I would like to take the opportunity to remind you that the largest and longest running marketing event in the Caribbean is going to be taking place in San Juan, Puerto Rico at the end of January 30th through February 1st. And today, up until tomorrow, is your last opportunity to register at a regular rate. After that, you'll be able to register, but the prices will go up. So take advantage, and now is the time to register for Marketplace. And I also wanted to remind you that this summer, the Caribbean is coming back to Miami, and CHTA's two summer events, CHEAP, the Caribbean Hospitality Industry Exchange Forum, and Taste of the Caribbean are both taking place consecutively, or actually simultaneously, in Miami, June 22nd through the 24th and June 22nd to the 26th. There are two events you will not want to miss out on, so please join us. And if these are just a few events, the webinars are just a few of the exclusive benefits that are offered to CHTA members. And if you're not a member, please reach out to us for more information. You can contact Marta Valdivia, our Director of Membership, and she will be happy to give you more information. Now I would like to welcome Mr. Frank Nieto, our CEO, to introduce today's speakers. Frank?
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you all of our participants and speakers today. We are really pleased. It's a timely topic, rebuilding and refurbishing for resiliency and efficiency. We hope to get some ideas, share some ideas and thoughts on how one can take advantage of opportunities to become more efficient with their build-out as well, both on the energy side and just operationally and sustainably to build more efficiently. We're pleased to have several panelists with us today, several presenters with us today. Actually, we have joining us from the British Virgin Islands, representing OBMI as strategic partner for CHTA, Marvin Flax. He heads up their BVI office and has done work for the company around the world as well. And Marvin, we hope, we know that the office was in one of your offices there in Tortola, are in one of the most sustainable buildings in the country. We hope that you weathered the storm well, and the rebuild is underway. We'll have several of our people in BVI next week as well. And also joining us on the energy efficiency side, because no better time to rebuild and refurbish does it present to look and see how we do that to help reduce one of our highest costs of operations, and that being the cost of energy. And joining us to lead a presentation around that is John Marcosio, who's with the CARSET project. That's the Caribbean Clean Energy Program, which is sponsored by the United States Agency for International Development, a project that we're working with. It's building on the good work that we've done on energy efficiency over the past 7 or 8 years with the CHTA project as well. And John will be talking about some of the kinds of things that could be happening, that you could be thinking about in terms of becoming more energy efficient in your rebuild and refurb. So without me speaking much longer, I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, who will be Marvin.
Thank you very much, Frank. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the BVI in a few days. You made mention earlier of our building being one of the sustainable buildings in the BVI. It's one of the oldest ones on Main Street, and it's referred to as a fireproof building. And after Irma, I feel pretty comfortable in saying it went from being fireproof to almost hurricane-proof. Took some damage to our roof, and had some challenges reopening, but we have some large shutters in front of the building that practically saved it, in my opinion. So first image you're looking at obviously the 3 hurricanes in the Caribbean. Obviously Irma right smack dab in the middle probably did the most damage in the Caribbean this year. To the right is Hurricane Jose. To the left, I think, Katrina over in the Gulf of Mexico. The image really is sort of meant to sort of convey the activity this hurricane season, and which has sort of led us to where we are right now. Next slide. Thank you. So this season being probably the most active we've had in I guess in history, safe to say. Extremely destructive, very costly in terms of damage. I'll by and large speak from a Hurricane Irma standpoint because I was here in the BVI when Irma made landfall on Tortola. Sustained winds of 185 miles per hour. Gusts upward of 215. Some people are saying their wind meters were in the 285 range, with tornadoes going up and down the hillside. And the damage we saw as assessments kind of confirmed the activity of tornadoes up and down, coming off, spawning on in the ocean, going up the hillside, and just sort of wreaking havoc. From a lives lost standpoint, in the Caribbean to date, 19 lives were lost. And that's sort of spanning from Barbuda, St. Martin, BVI, Turks and Caicos, and into South Florida, and then eventually making its way up into Georgia. Next slide, please. Adriana, next slide. Thank you.
Seem to be able to step. Oh, there we go.
a little delay, yeah. This image says it all. This is on the small island of Jocelyn Dyke, which is the immediate aftermath of Irma passing. This beach normally, from a tourism standpoint, New Year's in the BVI in Jocelyn Dyke, excuse me, it's considered one of the, at least it used to be, one of the top 10 places to be in the world to celebrate New Year's. And this is how it looks, at least September 6th. It's a lot cleaned up since then, but this is kind of how it looked. That church is kind of iconic in that as you're walking off the dock to go celebrate your New Year's, you're walking past the church and you're seeing the pastors and their, giving a sermon to the parishioners as party goers are walking by on New Year's. It's hard to say what this will be like come January 1, but this is an example of exactly what we experienced at BVI. Next slide, please. So a few stats on sort of the numbers associated with the hurricane throughout the Caribbean. And I'll focus on the BVI, obviously that's where I am. But if you look at our GDP last year, that's at $1 billion, of a population of 30,000 plus people. The damage estimates are 1.4 billion. So our GDP is lower, the damage is higher than GDP. And that's the same for St. Martin and Village. You also see the path that Irma took. Several islands were affected with Irma's path, and all going through varying degrees of recovery. Most recently, St. Martin was notified that the Disney Cruise Line will be getting the cruises that would normally be coming to the BVI, in part because we're just not ready, and that's part of the reality of the situation. On the positive side, today was the first day a cruise ship did come to BVI since the hurricane. So there are some positive signs, slowly but surely. Next slide, please. I think we skipped one. Maybe go back one, Adriana.
Go back one.
Maybe I got. Okay, I'm sorry. I have it confused. You're correct.
Okay.
So I wanted to include. I wanted to include these images because it gives another example of the damage to the infrastructure, because that ultimately affects all of us. Definitely on the hotel operator side, the owner side, and just the user and the resident. Upper right-hand corner, these are cell phone towers that literally bent in half. You see to the left, you see a lot of the electricity poles. Hopefully, with the talk of billions of aid dollars coming to the region, that we'll be able to bury the pole lines, the electrical lines, telecom lines. We're not sure when this will happen, but it's something I think as a region we need to do more of. I know some jurisdictions like Cayman have done a good job doing that, and I think Bermuda as well. So it's an example that we have to follow. The road network is in really bad shape. The tidal surge from the middle image came all the way in, and in some cases there were 20 to 30 foot waves. So we have a lot of rebuilding to do in general. In terms of a bit of advice, I would say for an operator, minimize minimize how much reliance you have on the grid. Maybe going to 30, 40, even 50% solar technology or wind. Also have satellite phones on hand at all times. And the good thing is you can have them and not necessarily need to activate them until maybe a day or two before the hurricane comes. So you can communicate, and also your staff and your guests who happen to be on property can communicate with their family and friends, let them know they're okay. Next slide, please. Insurance, not always the happiest topic. At OBM, we've been really directly involved with the insurance process probably a week after the hurricane, week after Irma and Maria, assisting property owners with independent assessments from the owner side that detail all the damage. We also gave recommendations. So what these assessments do is that they're able to cross-check them with the insurance adjuster's assessments, and there's some sort of mediation that can take place. From our experience with what we've dealt with so far, a lot of people locally are underinsured, where the value of the property is higher than what they're insured for. And the insurance adjusters have varying ways of calculating the value of property. But if you haven't updated your policy in 5 to 6 years, even more than that, just for example, your property may be worth $1 million, but you have it insured for $400,000, and your damage is at $300,000. Based on that calculation and ratio, the insurance adjusters, based on the policy type and how they calculate it, you're not going to get a tremendous amount of a claim. Factor in deductibles. So these are the challenges property owners are facing, individual homeowners are facing right now, and it's proving to be quite a challenge moving forward. We're not sure exactly how many properties will rebuild and when they will rebuild, if and when they rebuild, and to what degree. So as the slide mentioned, definitely retain your own independent adjuster. and have that document on hand to cross-check what the insurance adjusters give you. In addition, their insurance claim is going to ask you to get your own, get reconstruction estimates, get two, and definitely cross-check them as well. Next slide, please, Adriana. Thank you. As I said earlier, we've been doing so many assessments, damage assessments. We're seeing a lot of trends, particularly in roofs. Too many times we saw nails being used in roofs, and obviously with a high category 5 like what we experienced, nails are just insufficient to handle the uplift. And this image to the top right sort of articulates a few things that we traditionally don't do, but for some reason, when I say we, I say us as architects, but a lot of the builders have been utilizing this method of the smaller 1x2 pressure-treated battens with a 24-inch spacing, and you would attach your roofing material on that batten spacing. Now, if you use screws make it very easy for hurricane forces to pull back almost like a sardine can, your galvanized. So we suggest using screws. We suggest two things: increasing the size of your batten, reducing the batten spacing, and using screws that connect your battens all the way into your heavy timber rafters, which are not shown in the image but are beneath. Accordion shutters. We saw far too many examples of hurricane shutters that one could not close properly, so they weren't secure during the hurricane. And if they were secured properly, they just were easily ripped out by Irma, which ultimately led to windows and doors being pulled out, eventually leading to sort of tornadic activity inside the roof, inside the house, thus lifting off roofs in varying degrees. Some cases, the hurricane pulled rafters right out of cast-in-place concrete beams. So the process is really a combination of things that all have to be done together. Proper roof assembly, correct hurricane shutters, using screws, impact-resistant glazing, several things that you have to sort of have in a property to make it resilient. Next slide, please, Adriana. Thank you. So in the Caribbean, most of us use concrete. We use a combination of concrete block, cast-in-place concrete. Most of the homes and larger structures use a combination of heavy timber rafters that are joined together with horizontal and vertical steel. These two images give a really good example of how it should be done. Unfortunately, this example, we just didn't see too much of as we did our assessments. Obviously, you're seeing to the top right some heavy timber rafters, all horizontally connected with a reinforcement bar, and then that's also vertically connected and hooked over. And this is all prior to a concrete beam being cast. So ideally, you want to cast the concrete beam all at the same time. It creates this ideal bond between steel, the wood, and the concrete. And this sort of configuration, this gives you a better chance of surviving these hurricane force winds that we saw with Irma. A bit of additional to that, just reducing we like to have our long and wide eaves to give a shade and shadow. We're suggesting maybe pulling them back a bit to reduce the uplift, and using more softer, gentle roof pitches on a hip roof, maybe like a 4 and 12 or 2 and 12, they're just softer and easier, and the wind flow is simpler for them to go over. And this reduces the potential for uplift of the roof. And when I say roof, it's the entire assembly. But what we saw mostly was the galvanized, the actual roof, the metal roof was what got ripped off more often than anything else. And that will lead me to my next slide. Thank you. Screws. We highly advocate the use of screws as much as possible on a roof. Again, we saw far too often the use of nails, and with screws, you have this nice circular screwing bond that goes all the way down into the wood rafters that really, from a redundancy standpoint, really gives you a better chance of surviving a hurricane and not losing the galvanized. Because if the galvanized goes, chances are your waterproofing goes, your waterproofing might go, you might lose your wood decking, and then you're fully exposed. So this slide does not articulate it. It does show every other ridge of the galvanized sheet with a stainless steel screw. We advocate every single ridge now moving forward of that corrugated sheet to have a galvanized screw. You'd be obviously doing the same thing on each batten, working your way up to the ridge and to your hips. So suffice to say, you're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of screws to sufficiently secure your galvanized roof down to your roof battens. And of course, those same screws, similar screws are used to secure your battens to your heavy timber frame, which is the structural base of your roof in your house. Next slide, please. Walls, as surprising as this may seem, but we saw several homes with concrete block walls without steel in them. Minimal amounts of, sometimes no steel at all, and if they did have steel, minimal amounts. And in some cases, the cell of each block was not filled with concrete. This is really a typical detail from our structural engineers that we work with a lot, that advocate the use of sort of a horizontal connection of steel. It's referred to as the ladder type reinforcement, and then vertical pieces of steel. So this example is a number 4 rebar, 24 inches on center. And this example, we think, gives a better adherence and strength to a block wall. It's all part of the configuration. The slab, the walls, the roof, the steel, it's all joined and all together. So it sort of creates this perfect bond of materials that will fare better, in our opinion, with hopefully we won't be experiencing many more of these high category 5s, but we had 2 in 2 weeks between Irma and Maria. So there's a good chance we'll be seeing more of these types of hurricanes. Next slide, please. And when we talk about resilience in design and resilience in architecture, and I think in the Caribbean we have to be extremely smart, I guess, in light of this summer. And normally we're pretty good with hurricane shutters, but the example on the left is a property that we did an assessment for, where it's pretty clear this hurricane shutter just failed. And these are the accordion ones. I'm not a fan of them per se. I'm not going to call any companies out, but I'm not a fan of these shutters. Partly because they do seize up, and from all the salt air and salt blast over time, and they're difficult to latch when you're trying to prepare for the hurricane. And their mechanisms are, in my opinion, just not sufficient. Definitely not sufficient for Irma. In addition, you see the door and window assembly completely blown out. This is obviously an older property, and the older properties that we assessed by and large, did not fare well. And in some cases, some of the newer ones as well. And that's more of I think some properties are cutting corners. So we just have to be a little smarter. And we also, I believe moving forward, are going to have a revised building code, at least in the BVI, with a little more teeth, a little more adherence, a little more teeth to enforce the code. On the right is a shutter I personally prefer, and I attest to this because the house I was in during the hurricane had every home, every window had shutters like this. And while they all got beat up pretty badly from flying debris, they were able to save the windows, keep the windows and doors that they were protecting safe. Not to mention they are all fastened. If you look to the left and right of the shutter, you see a series of bolts that are fastened into what I would recommend, a reinforced concrete wall. So if one pulls out, you have a redundancy of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, in this instance, 6 of these units, 6 of these screws to keep the hurricane shutters in place. I also advocate not not using the electrically operated ones, because if you're in a sense of a power failure, you cannot open them quickly unless you have a generator or some type of backup power system. Next slide, please. So, doors and windows. Front lines dealing with the hurricane like Maria and Irma in terms of the force. A few things that happened with those hurricanes was the pressures. The millibar level for both, I think Irma was 908 and Irma was 915. So in some cases, some of the best designed impact-resistant glass panels did not survive, partly because of the pressure of the varying pressure of the millibars from each hurricane. So what happened was they actually blew out. Literally, in some cases, the panels were pushed inward into a home, or in some cases, they were pushed out. If a door and window was compromised, in some cases, the hurricane was able to push the entire panel and entire assembly out of its frame. That goes back to a few things. One, the frame not being adequately secured to the opening. If it's a concrete opening or masonry opening or a wood stud opening, we saw several examples of those openings not being properly fastened, the window frames not being properly fastened. So if you look to the left, you'll see an image of a window sample. This is I guess a sandwich, if you will. It's a 2 1/4-inch thick glazing panels with a laminated sheet, a laminated inner layer that keeps those two together. And what that does is that it minimizes the shattering component to a door and window or a glass panel. So if something were to hit it, it will probably crack depending on the speed and the trajectory. However, it won't completely shatter into millions of pieces all over the room and just produce a tornadic effect inside once you're completely exposed. Again, the doors and windows that are considered hurricane rated are not designed for what we experienced. They're not. So it's a combination of things. The hurricane shutters, the strongest windows you can get for what's presently been designed for, and just utilizing everything together. I hope in technology I will get that stuff as instead these hurricanes and the force is done, which is not reassuring, but it's just the reality of what we saw. Next slide. This is a picture of two roofs of a home we did on Tortola some years ago that's a bit different than what you normally see. It's sort of an example of a sort of cast in place guttering system. And the intent here is to minimize the amount of exposure to wood and the exposure of your fascia to hurricane force winds. Fascia and the eave are usually the weakest points of a roof, particularly if the wind can get under the metal sheathing, and thus causing liftoff. So this concept here is a continuous concrete gutter all around every element of the roof, and it hides the fascia in that the concrete gutter is a bit above it. So the wind, in essence, can't unnaturally go under and up and under and up and over. You know, how wind flows is more horizontal in nature. So I was able to check on this home from the owner a couple of days after the hurricane, and they were quite happy with how it held up in concept. And I guess it's not an inexpensive approach, but it's one we will be utilizing a lot more moving forward. Next slide, please. So, sort of in closing, a few opportunities that I think have come out of this hurricane, for at least here in the BVI and other jurisdictions like Dominica, St. Martin, Barbuda, is stronger codes. I think let me back up a little bit. This image is taken, picture was taken in the BVIs and on the north side of Tortola 2 weeks ago, and obviously it's a lot greener right now. How the mountain and hillside looked after the hurricane looked like a fire had stripped the entire island of every tree, every leaf, every branch. So there is hope. We are moving on. We are rebuilding slowly but surely. But coming out of the hurricane season is, we believe, stronger building codes. As they're currently in the process of reviewing Caymans, reviewing Jamaicas, reviewing Bermudas, and trying to utilize the bits and pieces of all those and sort of restructuring the BVIs. I think that's going to be across the board throughout the Caribbean, not just BVI. And just a few stories, you know, in speaking to some hotel operators, during the hurricane, they had guests staying in some of their rooms. And as, I guess, before the eye passed, some of their hotel rooms were just being ripped apart. And some of the operators themselves, pretty amazing stories, were actually going room to room, door to door during the hurricane and getting their guests out and moving them from what was being a ravaged room to a more secure room. And if that one got ravaged, we moved on to the next room. And that kept on happening until the eye came. And once the eye came, it was a bit of a 30, 15, 20-minute reprieve for people to run and seek more, I guess, safe shelter. And that in of itself was quite amazing. It happened in 3 properties that we've spoken to. So you really sort of commending the staff for just trying to save their guests. And funny enough, some of these hotels ended up putting their guests to work a few days after in cleaning up and securing, and the guests are more than happy to help them. So I just sort of trying to engage the guests a bit. And I guess they were very grateful too for helping them save their lives. And it sounds dramatic, and it really was. There was a lot of stories like that throughout the hurricane, people jumping from house to house during the eye, during the hurricane itself, trying to just seek shelter. So I hope I was able to enlighten you a bit about our experiences here in the BVI, what we're going through, and also resilience, things we suggest that can be done and should be done moving forward post-hurricane season 2017. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now John, are you there?
I am here, Adriana.
All righty. I'm going to move along to our next speaker.
Great.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Adriana, and thank you, everybody in the audience. Next slide, please. I just wanted to introduce the Caribbean Clean Energy Program to you. For those who are not familiar with this, it's a USAID-sponsored project that is operating in the following 8 countries throughout the Caribbean: Jamaica, St. Kitts, Barbuda, Antigua, Dominica, St. Lucia, Grenada, and Barbados. The program is designed to reduce energy consumption, fossil fuel consumption specifically, throughout the entire region, and it came out of an initiative from Joe Biden in 2015. So our program lasts 5 years, and we work at multiple levels throughout the every single destination throughout the 8 countries. The initial element there is in improving the enabling environment, and that involves working with the governments of the various countries to help them develop legislative changes that will encourage the adoption of renewable energy and energy efficiency. The second item, optimizing renewable energy integration, involves us working with the utilities in the various countries and the regulators to, again, develop technical agreements and standards and measures so that we can interact with private systems with the public utilities without causing any damages, and the regulators have the knowledge base and the level to facilitate the development of these new strategies. Energy is a very dramatic and changing environment. We're also working very closely with the private sector and investments to facilitate renewable energies, because as the CHTA program highlighted in their efforts, was the biggest impediment to adoption of renewable energies and energy efficiency throughout the entire region is the fact that access to financing is not quick and easy, and everybody that's in the hotel business is well aware of that. We don't have to elaborate. So CARSEP is working hard to work with development banks and private banking institutions to help them develop portfolios that make sense. And the fourth item there is the benchmarking energy efficiency in tourism. And that's what I'm involved in very directly. I'm the team lead for that. We work very closely with CHTA, and we are working with the hotel sector to help them improve energy efficiency and energy efficiency throughout the entire region. Next slide, please. Next slide is in the interconnectivity between climate change, vulnerabilities, and resilience. And if you look at the bottom half of the circle, you start with vulnerability and climate change. We don't have to elaborate on those two elements. We know, all of us know, especially after Marvin's presentation, and we see the after effects of what's happened this year, that we're all very vulnerable, and climate change is real no matter what anybody says. And we have to deal with it. So we have to build our resiliency, and we're going to do that through adaptive changes that we have to make in how we go about everything that we do, building, operating, producing energy, and facilitating our guests and staff. Next slide, please. So what is climate resiliency? Climate resiliency is about our ability to resist and absorb the shocks of these major events. The better we can offset the effects of these storms, the better off we're going to be. So we need to develop the ability to self-renew once the event has occurred. And how are we going to do that? We're going to do that by attempting to put in place systems that will help reduce the shock and maximize your resiliency. And that involves, diminishing your reliance on central systems like grid utilities, reducing your demand, which is called demand side management, so that you don't need so much power. And we're also going to speak about self-generation and why it's such an important thing to help you absorb the shocks. And it's self-generation is not only important for the disaster situations when those utilities are not available to you, but they're also very good for everyday operations. Next slide, please. So the objective of resiliency planning is to reduce the impact of the climate event, to minimize your downtime and get your property up and running as quickly as possible so your income stream gets back up and running and you can start getting yourself back to normality and getting your cash flow back to where you need, which is the critical element. And so you have to do that while you safeguard the well-being of your guests and as well as your staff, and I implore you to not forget about that last element, the staff. The staff are critical to your ability to get up and running. It's critical to your ability to generate income. So you got to make sure that in your planning process that you take in consideration your staff needs and requirements and the fact that they're going to be with you through thick and thin, and as Marvin said, right through the hurricane. So to increase your resiliency, you have to make a plan and you have to roll out your plan. Next slide, please. So I want to go over some of the things that CARSEP can do to help you with these. And I have to also start off by telling you that this is the backbone of a presentation that myself and my colleagues do for CHTA members in each of the member countries. And that workshop is actually a 2-day-long workshop. So I'm going to try and compress this as best I can into a 10-minute section that doesn't totally lose you. And if there's any questions that are going to be generated at the back end, then we're happy to answer, and you'll have my contact information. And as Adriana said, we're also going to share this presentation and slides so you can review it after the fact. So CARSEP is focused on energy. Marvin was focused on the building and construction elements. We're focused on the energy and reducing your need for power and consumption. So demand side management, and often referred to as energy efficiency, is all about reduction of your electrical consumption, reduction of your water consumption, reduction of all fuel consumptions, including diesel and LPG, and reduction of pollution and greenhouse gas emissions, so that we can do our part for mitigating against the effect of climate change. I'm not going to get into that today because that's a very long and lengthy conversation. We all know it's real. We all know we have to do a lot of things. So adaptation goes a long way to improving resiliency and helping combat the effects of climate change. We also, once we have managed to maximize our energy efficiency, then we have to get into the conversation with regards to maximizing the amount of self-generation you do on the reduced demand. And I'm stressing this, on the reduced demand, because it makes no sense that you try to employ self-generation renewable energy techniques to very inefficient systems. That's just throwing good money after bad. So first and foremost, you need to reduce your increase your energy efficiency, reduce your demand as much as possible by doing that, and then generating as much power as you can on your own. That includes water as well. Self-sufficiency is critical, especially in storm events, and we strongly encourage the capturing of rainwater. Rainwater use can be a lifesaver in these times of trouble. Although it's not necessarily potable water, there's a lot of other functions that can be done and taken care of with rainwater that's very critical. Next slide, please. So why is it important to self-generate? It's in the Caribbean, we have two issues and two very big problems which drive up our operating costs tremendously. One is that we consume a lot of electricity for every GDP dollar earned. We're very much skewed into high consumption for dollars produced. That has to do with a lot of factors. As said in our 2-day workshop, we get into all those things and why they are, but suffice it to say for today that those exist, they're real, and you probably are aware of them. And the second thing is that the unit costs for the kilowatt hours that we can do is some of the highest in the world. And so we need to transform, and we need to become more energy efficient and solar thirsty. And why I say that is because we are, at this point in time, extremely oil thirsty. Next slide, please. This next slide shows you two graphs, and the two graphs are what fuel is used to produce electricity, how we produce the electricity. So the graph on the left shows you what is the norm throughout the Caribbean, excluding Trinidad and Tobago and the Dominican Republic that produce their own oils. So you can see by the slide that 92% of all the electricity generated in the Caribbean, even now that we have deployed significant amounts of renewable energy, are still at 92%. So 92% of our electricity comes from oil. The slide on the graph on the right indicates what's happening when you include Trinidad and Tobago. It skews it, makes it a little bit better, but it's only good for those countries that are in those regions. Next slide, please. So what we need to do is we need to convert our thirst for oil into thirst for energy efficiency and solar. How? As I mentioned before, we have to reduce our demand as much as possible through demand side management. And once you've maximized those efficiencies and you're doing things as efficiently as possible, then you want to get into renewable energy use. And offsetting your utility needs provides the best return on investment. Again, at our normal workshops, next slide please, we would go into this at great length and prove to you the economic viabilities of these and why it makes absolute economic sense. Even if you are borrowing money at a very high Caribbean bank rates, your return on investment for taking those loans out make it exceedingly smart for you to take out those loans and to reduce your dependence on the utilities as much as possible. Unfortunately, today I can't get into it, but in follow-up, we can elaborate further with you individually or collectively. So in this next slide here shows you why it matters. The average Caribbean price is for electricity is 33 cents US per kilowatt hour. And this is a graph that was done obviously when I was in Grenada. It just shows you, and so you somewhere along those lines you fit into that graph. Next slide, please. And I want to show you what the value of energy efficiency and renewable energy is and the cost of those. So this slide I really, really enjoy because I'm an engineer by background. But this comes out of the work that CHTA did over the years and through IDB's funding of that program. And it identifies the costs of energy sources since from 2009 to 2015. And you'll see in this graph, the size of those circles indicate the amount of electricity that is potentially saved by deploying those technologies. So the larger the circle, the more megawatt hours. You can see at the top there, energy efficiency, there's a potential saving for 200 megawatt hours. To give you an idea what that means, Jamaica's maximum demand at any point in time is 600 megawatts. And that's one of the bigger islands. The smaller islands like St. Lucia is at 120 or so megawatts. That's to supply the entire island. We get into the smaller islands, Grenada, Antigua, and such, and you're down into 30, 40, 50 megawatts of power. So you see that's very significant. And if you take the individual circles and you take a vertical line down to the bottom x-axis there, you'll see the actual cost of those measures in terms of per kilowatt cost of deploying those measures. And this indicates the cost of producing power that way. It also is indicative of the cost of avoiding the use of energy. For example, the solar water heating. So by investing in a investing in a solar hot water heating system, you're actually reducing your reliance and need on electrical system. So if you analyze the cost of that system over the lifetime of that system, and you can calculate how many kilowatt hours of power you save over that lifespan of that system. And so this is indicated and ends up being analyzed, and you can determine a cost per kilowatt hour of avoided power. And you can see that in that slide, a solar system over the lifetime, the amount of energy that is displaced there is worth 2 or 3 cents per kilowatt hour. And you can look at the solar as well, which is a little bit on the higher end. These are older figures. It's up around 14, 15 cents. And you have wind, you have some natural gas in Jamaica. Now, if you look to the far right of this graph, again, this was done for Grenlec presentation. So, sorry, Grenada presentation. This is Grenlec's power is at 40 cents. For the Caribbean-wide presentation, that should show you an average Caribbean-wide cost of a power of 33 cents. So, with your average cost being 33 cents, as has been found in the CHTA programs, the cost of energy efficiency throughout the region is 8 cents per kilowatt hour. And if you look at, and that's energy management, energy efficiency. If you look at PV, PV is photovoltaic. That is the production of electricity using solar power. Right now, the cost is around about 12 cents and dropping per kilowatt hour. So if you combine in your property a combination of energy, deployment of energy efficiency and deployment of a renewable energy system, then you're talking about a power cost to your property of around 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Now you have to see and analyze that as opposed to what it would cost you if you're buying that power from the utility. And on average, that's 33 cents. So the cost of a kilowatt hour of saved or self-generated energy costs you 1/3 of what it costs for you to buy that power from the utility. So I hope you can see from this slide that even if you are borrowing money at exorbitant hotel and commercial rates throughout the Caribbean, the value that and the savings generated more than offset those costs of the loans. Next slide, please. So if it's true what I'm saying to you, you have to ask yourself, if it's such a good investment and it makes so much economic sense, why haven't we done this yet? And the answer in the very short form is that we in the Caribbean don't value preventative maintenance. And EE investments are not understood by the budget makers. The CFOs don't understand it. So as a result of this, the CFOs are not making money available to the facility managers that oftentimes are well aware of the value of these types of investments but are unable to extract those dollars required to implement these changes to reduce the operating costs. So what we got to do is the managers, the facility managers and the hotel operators have to make money available for energy efficiency and renewable energies deployment in their facilities. And it's also the easiest thing to cut when times get tight and when budgets are not met. The first thing that goes is the maintenance budget because it's not something that's a direct experience to the guests. So it's easy to do. Next slide, please. But our argument is that the returns available through judicious implementation of EE and RE projects yield a very high returns and the cost of borrowing money and exceed the cost of the borrowing money. And I've underlined judicious because all of us through the Caribbean have experienced a situation where we're relying on advice given to us and products that are on the market that don't yield the expected results. This is why judicious is there. We have to be careful what we're doing. We have to make sure that we're not taking advice from equipment suppliers that may be giving you skewed information. Audits are critical and should be done, but to start this process off, that's the smartest thing to do to help you in your decision-making process. With regards to resiliency planning, the Barbados Department of Emergency Planning has stated that for every dollar a hotel spends on preparedness yields them a $4 saving in the event of a storm event and the recovery. So the monetary decision makers are not recognizing what the value of these investments are, and they're not making monies available. And that's a big problem. In our workshop, we spend a lot of time and energy dealing with this and trying to show people why this is critical and why it's important. Next slide, please.
John,
Yeah.
we will need to wrap up in about 5 minutes to be able to have a little bit of time to answer some questions that have popped up.
Okay.
So maybe we finish with this part of
so we can let's skip to the next slide then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So at CARCEP, what we have done is we have created an energy benchmarking tool. The energy benchmarking tool is a dynamic modeling tool that is housed on the CHTA website. It's available to all the members, and it works very well in lieu of an audit, and it allows you to input your energy consumption patterns so you can see where your consumption is and what you can do to correct it. And it answers some of those questions about what is the most sensible things to do. And it's available free of charge to all CHTA members, and it will help you develop a good strategy for energy saving and reduction, and see how your property compares to all other properties in the area as well, and helps you making those smart decisions on reducing your energy costs. Next slide, please. So we can identify low-cost and no-cost items that get you down 20 to 30%, sometimes with no capital costs at all, and simply behavioral changes that are required in your property to make those things happen. And then also we get into the discussion about the quality and the impacts of people, and the fact that your guests will not suffer through the whole process. So next slide, please. I'm sorry I'm rushing this, but we need to wrap this up. So in conclusion, the Caribbean countries, we can't afford to fail. That's the bottom line. Tourism is our economic lifeline. So we have to do this disaster planning and to reduce the downtimes in the event of the occurrence, and it's going to occur. It's a question of when, not if. So the resiliency planning pays big dividends. And the cost of avoided kilowatt use or self-generated is a third. And this maximizes your profits, and whether there's a storm event or not, this is good planning on your part, and will help you become more profitable and become more resilient, because you understand the impacts of lost revenue streams as well. Next slide, please. And then next slide again. So this is our contact information. I said energy benchmarking tool is a tool that we've got that's available. It's on the CHTA website. You can contact either myself or Christine Young, and we will provide you with information. We have rolled out these workshops in every one of our countries except Barbados to date. So perhaps you can get some information at your local hotel and tourism association as well. And we're here to be contacted, and we can easily work with you, set up your account, and get you rolling forward. And just in the final conclusion is that the presentation has quite a number of more slides attached to it, a couple of examples to show you why it's an economic advantage. It also continues on with some additional information with regards to the energy benchmarking tool that we've made available and what it does and how it can do it for you. So if you want more information, you can contact us, or just take the time to look through the presentation. You'll see lots more information, and we're available to you anytime you're ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, and thank you for giving us so much information in such little time. As you can see, this is the rest of the presentation. This will be emailed to you probably before the end of the day today. So you'll be able to have access to all of this, as well as access to the two gentlemen, our two experts that have so kindly made themselves available. You will be able to email them, call them with any questions. Also, I wanted to take a minute and go quickly onto just so you can see where that is on our website. If you go to our website, CaribbeanHotelAndTourism.com, you will see that the energy benchmarking tool, if you go to our Knowledge Center right here, the energy benchmarking tool is right there. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and register, all you have to do is, and this is this is a CHTA member exclusive benefit. All you have to do is go there, go to this page, click enter, and move on from there. If you need any hand-holding, feel free to reach out to John, but it's a wonderful, wonderful resource, and it's available to you for being a CHTA member. So now let's go ahead and proceed with the Q&A. And again, here are the contact information for our two speakers. And Marvin, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, wonderful, because we have a couple of questions, and let's see. Mr. Shields asks, if electricity grids can experience downtime due to the destruction of power lines and substations, how can this issue of energy reliability be overcome using solar power and wind technology, which seems to be a similar susceptible physical infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's an alternative. It's an option. I've seen several actually solar panel farms between St. Thomas and here on Tortola that actually did survive and did hold up pretty well. The owners of those panels did secure them and fasten them in such a way where they were very difficult to lift off. What that does, though, I mean, it obviously provides you with alternative use of power while your primary source of power, your electrical grid, is down, and in some cases, at least here locally, is still down in most of the island. So it's a backup. Obviously, you have generators you can use as well, which you've seen, gosh, hundreds of them being bought since the hurricane to assist in this exact same reason. So I think it's fascinating. Yeah, go ahead, John.
I just want to give you a little antidote because people have asked this question ever since the storms. What happens with the solar panels and does it make sense? We have one hotelier in Dominica who had a 26-panel system on his roof. After the storm, he hunted into the woods and found 6 of the 26 panels that were intact, and he put them back on his roof. And the rest of the system obviously was okay. And even though he has got no grid power, he's got 6 panels producing power, so he's able to get on the internet. He's able to have some lights at night and do some limited stuff. So he's benefited from it.
Wonderful. Okay, we have Ted Vogel is asking, what about poured concrete for roofs? It has been a very successful design point in South Florida post-Hurricane Andrew. Is it too expensive in the Caribbean?
It's not too expensive. I would suggest that would be for more new construction. Existing construction requires a lot of structural engineering design up front to at least to inform if a structure can handle a concrete roof. We've been asked that question so many times. I remember standing in line for ice 2 days after the hurricane, and that conversation came up at least 10 times. And it's not as easy as it may seem. I think there needs to be a lot of pre-design upfront. Okay, I apologize, guys. The guys from Flow are here fixing our fiber line that got damaged in a hurricane, so I apologize. I'm kind of happy that they're fixing it. But yeah, it's about, I think it's more new construction as opposed to existing construction where a concrete roof would work best, in my opinion.
Okay. Alejandro Tejada has a question. How do you foresee the demand of backup power generation via generators changing in this new green era?
I see, if I can jump in there, I see, again, is one of the things I couldn't cover today that we cover in our workshop quite extensively. Self-generation through microturbines now are producing power for about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. That is just for the power alone, not taking into account the waste heat. If you couple that with the waste heat that you can capture and use to heat hot water, your cost of that electricity drops to less than 10 cents or around 10 cents. So I see that being more and more popular. These machines are becoming much more user-friendly, little maintenance. Couple that with a PV system and you're flying. And you're also very resilient. In the event of a storm, you're back up and you can actually continue to run right through the storm without a problem.
Adriana, if you don't mind, I
Yes.
want to add something to I think Mr. Vogel's question about the concrete roof.
Mm-hmm.
Not the entire Caribbean is not in an earthquake zone, but I know parts of Puerto Rico, parts of the BVI and USVI are, as are several of the islands to the south. So the fact that we're in an earthquake zone gives a lot of us pause for putting concrete roofs on homes. Obviously, with an earthquake, everything collapses, and with a concrete roof, you have a less chance of surviving if your roof collapses in an earthquake. So these are sort of things that, from a design and practicality standpoint, that we take into consideration.
Okay. And this is going to have to be our last question because we ran out of time. Let's see. So utilize solar and wind is not realistically permissible in many islands. What is the path around lack of local ordinance? Cost savings for renewable energy sites is massive over local energy costs, but politics doesn't seem to allow this to move forward. Is this the main impediment to adoption in the region?
Well, this is a very good and very valid concern and question, and I'm really happy to tell you that issue is becoming less of and less of an issue every single day. I've been pounding the pavements with renewable energies for many, many years. The resistance is fading very, very quickly. And CARCEP, as I pointed out in my first slide, we work at very, very numerous levels. The legislative issue is something we're working in a lot of the countries, helping the governments change those regulations, helping the utilities understand that there's other revenue models that they need to adopt so that they can continue to be profitable and be solid. And so their resistance to allowing other people to connect and private power producers to exist is also diminishing. So that still is a reality in certain jurisdictions, and of course there's some dinosaurs that are going to take longer to make the transition, but I'm telling you today without any hesitation, it's going to change. It has to change. It's just a matter of when it'll change, and it is changing very dramatically, and I've noticed the difference even in the last 2 years that the CARCEP program has been in place, that more and more governments and utilities are reaching out saying, okay, how do we accommodate these new things? So don't worry, you'll be allowed to very shortly if you're not already.
That's great news. Okay, well, on that very high note, we're going to close the webinar. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thank you to Adriana.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Everyone, we'll see you in the next one. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation as well as a recording of this webinar will be made available on our website, and it will also be emailed to you if you registered for this webinar. Thank you once again and have a great day. Bye-bye.